At Cox Automotive, we are always trying to find a way to make developers better.
I think KMM also gives us a way to get the developers collaborating again.
Familiar language, there's no extra runtimes, familiar tool set.
So you don't have to worry a whole lot about what goes on behind the scenes. I think that's a clear benefit as well.
It's got a lot of the benefits, not a lot of the weaknesses. My name is Robert. I'm a dev manager here at Cox Automotive. I work with 3 mobile teams consisting of Android and iOS developers, and we produce the Provision app, Stockwave app, and we're working on a 3rd project currently.
Yeah, my name is Turker Nessa Kucuk, and I'm one of the tech leads that just Robert mentioned, one of the teams. And I work closely with Robert. I also manage the Provision and Stockwave apps.
So the company is all about dealer software and car buying software. So this Provision specifically is an inventory management tool for car dealerships. And we have dealers nationwide using it to appraise vehicles and assist with their pricing strategies. This app has been around, I'm going to say about 9 years now, going on 10, about to hit the double digits. Well, I didn't have anything until about the start of this year. Came across through some recommendations, and then Touker is also he joined the team this year and had some good things to say about it. So that definitely helped investigation efforts. Not a whole lot of experience up until I guess relatively recently, and we've been trying to find ways to integrate it into our current workflow so far.
I used Kotlin Multiplatform for 2 years, almost 2 years in our previous role. We basically started as an exploration project. Hey, can we use this? We wrote this very extensive module twice, once for Android, once for iOS. And then we was like, hey, there's got to be a better way. And that kind of led to an exploration, and we landed in KMM. So basically that became the testing grounds, and we rewrote that library in KMM. So then the rest is history. So then we kept adding on more, adding more and more, writing more libraries. Yeah, that was a good journey.
So the first thing that comes to mind, right? So the purpose behind analytics, and that's to have meaningful, consistent data, not just on one platform, but on both. Sure, we can log a button click here and a screen view there, but what does it all mean? And how do we ensure consistent data between platforms? So that's the big thing that we were having some trouble with. We'd have devs asking from the Android team to the iOS team, how did you spell list price? Was that with a capital L? Did you put a space in there, camel case? And even still, we would have some situations of we would get different things logged. Some things would come in with different parameters because one person had an idea and just didn't share it with others, and things happen. And so we're just trying to find a way to mitigate that and find a common ground to just mitigate those differences.
Did you integrate with a specific analytics tool for that?
It wasn't necessarily a tooling question for us. It was more of just of an implementation of actually having a good mindset for analytics and implementing that. So we've had Firebase going for a long time. We've kind of had Google Analytics running in the background as well, just to see what the differences are. And we've experimented with some other tools as well.
So what does that look like kind of architecturally? Like, are you pinging those analytics APIs from your shared code? Are you kind of injecting it in some way and just having the events defined and shared?
Yeah, so what we ended up doing, we have a framework we created in a KMP library and it does 2 things for us. The first one, it's kind of a mouthful, but it's an abstract implementation for logging events to analytics services, event-based analytics services. So that's the first thing it does. The second thing that we use it for is to define our shared code, what are the strings that we want to be logging, what are the events that we want to be logging. And from there, it's the app's responsibility to tell that framework, here's the tool that I want to use, and here's the trigger point for the event that I'm calling. A number of folks get involved with this kind of just to make sure that we were going about it the right way, because we wanted this framework to be set up so that we could use this on multiple projects, multiple apps. And so we had a rough draft of something going on here, and then Touker and all the guys on his team tore it apart for a little while and tried to really make sure that it's foolproof and gonna shine. Fortunately, it's simple. It's a relatively simple concept here, but we just really wanted to make sure that it was gonna hold up to the future.
And has it so far? I guess like it hasn't been that long yet,
Yeah.
but
So far it has. We're starting to integrate it in a lot more things, and it's been a good way to get folks more interested in this environment. So there's a lot of mobile devs here, not just on these 3 teams, and it's been a good way just to get some exposure, get something out there, a working example for folks to see. Hey, here's how you can get into it.
Also, I think, if I may add, I think because it's a relatively straightforward implementation as opposed to a very complex project, I think that people get their hands dirty easier, like because it's you don't fear it as much. Okay, I can grasp it, I can appreciate it, and I can use it in my implementation. So I think that also played a key role into adoption.
We're looking at options for speeding up development, making developers better, lowering the cost of development, all these things that really lead to the conversation of cross-platform technology. And that's a huge play for us right now. We're trying to find something that fits well, not only for our, find the things that work well for our existing projects and for new projects that come around, which they may or may not be the same thing. So there's a lot of different things that are kind of in play, and through Cox Automotive, especially, there's a lot of different projects and different apps that we are a part of and we work with.
When you were figuring out what would work for you, did you evaluate other cross-platform frameworks, or were you more focused on we know native, let's compare that to Kotlin Multiplatform, or did you bring other ideas into?
Oh yeah, we were looking at some other technologies as well. And Flutter was a big one that we've got some eyes on. The company has a history with Xamarin and progressive web apps as well. So we've kind of taken from some learning experiences from that. We were looking at what's important to us right now. And for our example, in our app, it's a large legacy code base. So we had to take that into consideration, that we're not about to rewrite the entire thing in the next couple of months. And so KMM came into the picture. If I could relate KMM to maybe a comic book character here, I would say it's a lot like Blade. It's got a lot of the benefits, not a lot of the weaknesses. For us, the things that we liked a lot, hey, it's a familiar language. There's no extra runtimes, familiar tool set. Best of all, and the most important one, a low risk of entry. We can get a lot of benefits and start working with shared code without having to rewrite all of our legacy code, all of our UI, which is just a little unrealistic. So that low risk of entry was a huge win.
I would also add, you can develop a C++ library, for example, right? And you can try to share that. But, C++ has its own expertise. They're not necessarily just because you know C++ doesn't mean that you're a mobile developer, and vice versa. Just because you're a mobile developer, you don't know necessarily C++. So you could use an existing knowledge, people who know Kotlin or Java in your team. And okay, I'm going to teach them C++ or something novel to get some multi-platform benefits. So that was, I think, kind of an unintended positive benefit. Basically, the overall vision with using CI/CD into and integrating with KMM was basically we wanted to treat our own code as a third-party library, just like you would do it as if you were to install Firebase. When you treat your code as a module, it comes with multiple benefits. Like you have separation of concerns, you have ease of unit testing, and you got this modular thinking, think every function as a module sort of thing. So there's definitely well-documented benefits of developing in that style. But also there's another benefit, right? The developer who gets this library and doesn't have to worry about the implementation details of it. Going back to the Firebase example, if you're a curious developer, you can go back into the look at the code. But more often than not, I would guess that most people don't know how Google decided to implement all sorts of functionalities in the Firebase. So you could just focus on your app. So you don't have to worry a whole lot about what goes on behind the scenes. I think that's a clear benefit as well. So when we treat our own code that way, that's basically one of the ultimate benefits.
Like one of the things that often is like becomes complicated in the KMP context in particular is like how you generate that binary for your shared library and where that lives and where you publish it to and all that.
So basically, it's relatively straightforward at this time because we only have one module, and you're basically creating an Android archive for Android builds and XC framework for iOS platform, and we just upload them to our internal, private repository. So basically, really, we're emulating as though you would just download like a third-party library from Maven or something. So since it's a one-time, it's just one module at the moment, so that's how we're treating at the moment. But our plan is to add more modules and scale it up. So yeah, it's relatively straightforward setup at the moment.
And from the iOS side, do they consume that as Kotlin or do they consume it as the framework?
As the framework, yeah. I think one of the discoveries or investigation is once we have multiple modules, because we are well aware that you can only have one XC framework at this time, and unless the specifications changes in the future. So those are the rules that we're playing with. So we'll have to do some DevOps scripting or come up with some creative idea to generate single XC framework. There are multiple ways to go about this, but we're not there yet.
Yeah, you can have more than one now, but they can't really talk to each other. So like often it's better to have one.
Right.
But for things like analytics, sometimes you can get away with leaving that isolated.
Right. I think the exploration point is basically, as Russell said, just how we scale this to multiple modules and libraries. I think we're going to keep up treating our own code as a third-party library sort of thing. I think we're going to keep that up for the foreseeable future. But establishing sustainable, repeatable, clean development practices for KMM, I think that's basically setting a good precedent so that any team member can, even if it's a new team member, can kind of pick up the rope and start climbing on it. And hey, I don't know it yet, but I can look at the examples and then kind of go from there. So I think that's basically where we grow from here, is just establishing those patterns within the company, documenting them, and making it available to everyone in the team so that we have a good and easy to follow practice for KMM.
Do you know yet like what the next modules you're going to build will be?
Shared code is the next step. So analytics is that's our kind of our baseline entry point here, our low risk entry point. The next step on here is to find some common things between the app that we can start extracting and dropping in here. And then ultimately we want to get to a point where we can, where we have our whole API layer. At least in my mind, that would be the ideal state. We've got our whole API layer extracted out into this KMM project. We're a ways away from that for right now, but at least that's something that we want to work towards.
I was curious, at this stage, besides like the ability to have multiple independent frameworks that can talk to each other, if you had a list of like things you would love to see solved like tomorrow, and that can include libraries, that can include runtime stuff, that build related things, distribution related things, we would love to see the following.
I think I use that platform over almost 2 years, and so making it clear when this object graph freezing, making it clear to the developers that this is a frozen object, and there are only certain actions you can take on this frozen object, and this is a mutable object, and there's certain actions you can take on that. Making it clear to the developers somehow as you're developing the code, I think that would help a lot with the production crashes and that sort of thing. And also with the newer devices, we have all the devices have multiple cores. So somehow making it more multi-thread friendly. I know when Android is relatively straightforward, there's not a whole lot to worry about that. For iOS, you have to be more cognizant about, okay, which thread did I get this object from and which thread it's going to go to. And there are certain usage patterns in each platform. So kind of take that into account. I mean, in Android, you could be using coroutines and that sort of thing. In iOS, you could be using Grand Central Dispatch or other sorts of maybe RX Swift that also gives you a lot of threading options. So kind of make it more multi-thread friendly, I would say, would be as you scale up, you're going to start seeing these issues.
I second that last point there. So it's probably the biggest one that paused us for a moment when we were getting a little ahead of ourselves, getting a little ambitious and just trying to move forward and run with things. And then some conversations about multi-threading issues might be a thing. We should probably watch out for it. And given a lot of the devs are still pretty green with it, we do have, thankfully, Touchlab and we've got another guy on the team here that's got some previous experience with it. So that helped us realize, we should really make sure we understand what we're getting into before we go full out into this. So that's part of our next steps. That's kind of why we're incrementing, or we're getting towards an API state, as we really want to make sure we know what we're doing before we get there.